fairest Lord Jesus, ruler of all nature, O thou of God and man the Son, thee will I cherish, thee will I honor, thou my soul's glory, joy, and crown. Fair are the meadows, fairer still the woodlands, robed in the blooming garb of spring. Jesus is fairer, Jesus is purer, who makes the woeful heart to sing. Fair is the sunshine, fairer still the moonlight, and all the twinkling starry host. Jesus shines brighter, Jesus shines purer than all the angels heaven can boast. Beautiful Savior, Lord of the nations, Son of God and Son of man. Glory and honor, praise, adoration, now and forevermore be thine.
This evening, we'll be looking at lesson 54, and this is going to be another one of those that kind of break it down into subsections. And so last week we kind of did the introduction, subsection A. Tonight we're going to be looking into what it calls subsection B, which starts some of the parables of Jesus. Tonight specifically we're looking at the parable of the sower. This parable comes from Matthew 13, chapter 3 through 23, and that's where the main parable is. If you're not following in the textbook, workbook, if you want to turn to Matthew 13, you can follow along there with us in the lesson, and that will be fine. When we left off last week, we were talking about the idea of what a parable is. And generally speaking, as we said, the easiest answer for that is to lay down side by side, to lay down a physical circumstance, what some might think of as a story, and then make spiritual applications. And I kind of think about it like a railroad track. One of the tracks is the story or the parable itself, and the other rail is the spiritual implications from that. And all the cross ties are where you draw the lines from the physical story to the spiritual implications. And so that's kind of the way I think of it as a railroad track. Get the main story, the main rail down there, and then it's other rail, which is for the spiritual side, and then draw your lines. The way that I have also thought about a parable is it's Jesus used them to teach something, and we mentioned that last week. They didn't have a New Testament. Many of them didn't have an Old Testament. There were scrolls in the synagogues and various places that they might have access to. But when people walked away from Jesus' teaching, the parables, most of these stories, and even as old as we are, we can probably remember some of the nursery stories that our moms read to us or told us from years ago. And so when you hear that, for some reason the mind grabs onto that. Someone tells us a story and our mind can easily grasp the story, and then when you walk away with the story, you can begin to think about it and again draw various conclusions, spiritual conclusions from that. And so the one we're looking at tonight is the parable of the sower. I have over the years also referred to it as the parable of the soils. There's a couple things going on here. The emphasis was that the sower went forth to sow his seed, and then it progresses to talk about the various ground that the seed fell in. And so, the sower is an important part, and casting or sowing the seed is an important part, and I don't mean to downplay that, but it's the soils and what those soils represent that helps us to understand the lesson. And I've found it very helpful over the years. I've said this before, but just by way of introduction to this, sometimes we wonder why when people hear the gospel, they react in a certain way. Well, the parable of the sower, the parable of the soils, helps us to understand why somebody we thought was going to do well, we haven't seen in years. And we can't quite figure out where they went or what happened to them. Some we know where they're at, and we go back and try to talk to them and get them back in church, and it seems like, it just falls on deaf ears. And so this parable helps us to understand some of the circumstances or situations that have transpired in that individual's life. And so with that, does anybody have any comments or anything as we get started here? Behold, the sower went forth to sow his seed, and it came to pass, as he sowed, some seed or seeds fell by the wayside, and it was trodden under foot, and the birds of heaven came and devoured it up. And others fell among the rocky places on the rock where it, or they, had not much earth, and straightway it, or they, sprang up, because it had no deepness of earth, and when the sun was risen, it was scorched, and because it had no root, withered away. And as soon as it grew, it withered away because it had no moisture. The other fell among or amidst the thorns, and the thorns grew up with it and choked it, and it yielded no fruit. And others fell upon or into the good ground, and grew and brought forth 100-fold, and yielded fruit growing up, and increasing brought forth 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold. As he said these things, he cried, He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Now, this is kind of interesting because this is a statement that we see in the letters to the churches of Asia. He that hath ears to hear, let him hear. Though the letters may have been originally written to those 7 churches, much like the soils representing the heart of individuals, those churches there in Asia gives us a good cross-section of churches and problems that churches have. And so we have this story, and it's not something that those who heard it, this parable, had any trouble with, because this was something that many of them had seen many times. They had seen someone, a servant or the owner of a field, many times having a sack or satchel type thing on their shoulders filled with grain, walking out amongst the field and taking a handful of grain and just throwing it. And another step or two and throw some more, and another step or two and throw some more, and working back and forth across the field until the field was sown with what here is, and to them was wheat. And so in the process of time, the wheat is going to respond differently depending upon where it falls, whether it falls by the wayside, whether it falls into stony ground or on stones, or whether it's going to be in a place that maybe wasn't cleared as well as others, and there will be weeds, thorns that grow up with it. And of course, then what we're really hoping for is the final product, which is the majority of the field, hopefully, that it will produce good wheat. Now, in this story, it talks about 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold, and this is something that people were aware of. The wheat that came to harvest, depending on the type of year it was, if it was a poor season, a head of wheat would have about 30 grains of wheat, the little nuggets that are in there, the seeds or the grains. If it was an average year, each head of wheat would probably average about 60, which means for the one seed sown, you get 60 back. And then if it was an exceptional year, you'd get about 100 grains, granules of wheat that would be on the head of that wheat. And so not every one produces exactly the same in the same year, depending on its location. Even if the ground was good, some will produce 30, 60, and 100-fold. And of course, everybody's rooting for the 100-fold, because that's, again, where the money is. So that we have some for our use, we have some maybe to sell, we have some to put back to sow again for next year and to sell. And so this is a story everyone can relate to. This isn't it's kind of strange. It's not some mystical thing in the sense that everybody just sits around, I don't understand this. Now, I'm sure a lot of young people today might not understand it, who've never really experienced, seen, or thought about these kind of circumstances. But Jesus wants their attention. He tells them this, and again, remember, he's at the seashore there at Galilee. He's in a boat, and he's pushed out a little ways from shore. And he has a natural amphitheater there where people can listen to him. The multitudes can listen to him as he teaches. And so when he finishes that, he cries out with a loud voice, an emphasis upon that. If you have ears to hear, then you need to hear the account here of the parables. And so as we look at the situation, as he is talking here and he's speaking to them, he begins to identify certain circumstances or situations with the parables. And so when he was alone, now this is one of the parables that he taught. Now there's more parables here that we can find in Matthew 13. There's quite a few parables of the kingdom there. But we're told that when he was alone, after the multitudes had been dismissed, much like where we're studying in Matthew 24, he says something about the temple and all those things. And then later on, when he's sitting on Mount Olivet, his disciples come and ask him about those events. So when he was alone, once the multitudes had dispersed, the disciples came. And we always want to think about this, the multitudes versus the disciples. Just because you have a lot of people don't necessarily mean you got a lot of disciples. A disciple is a true hearer, one who's truly committed. Now the multitudes went away. But once they went away, the disciples came, and they were about him, the 12. And his disciples asked him of the parables, and notice it's plural. And so he will look at some of the other parables in later lessons. But they asked him about the parables that he had spoke. And primarily he will first address here, of course, the parable of the soil or the sower. And they wanted to know what this parable might be. They've got the one track down. They've got the story. But they need to tie it to something. And so they're wanting him to help them to understand why it is that he spent that time talking about a guy sowing wheat in a field. That they got, that they knew. Now they're asking him that, what is the meaning or the purpose behind the parable? And we get this answer. He answered and said unto them, unto you is given to know the mysteries, or is given the mystery of the kingdom of heaven. But to them, the rest, it is not given. In parables unto them that are without, all things are done in parables. And so it seems kind of interesting, but parables also become a test. Those who were there, the multitudes, who had various reasons to be following Jesus, and they weren't necessarily always concerned about being a disciple. And so those who came to Jesus said, the reason for the parables is this. Those who heard the parable and went home don't and won't know the purpose or the reason behind it. But you, the disciples, you are inquisitive. You ask. A lot of people listen to the story, and again, they thought, well, it's a good story, but they didn't ask Jesus, what do you mean by this? Or why did you, we're all here to hear you, and why are you talking about sowing wheat? They didn't ask. Some of them may have looked at each other and asked, what's the purpose or what's the reason? But they didn't come to Jesus. But Jesus said, for those who inquire, those who are truly interested, they would learn and know, and especially the 12 who were with him had the opportunity to listen and ask questions after everyone had left. And he speaks these parables, and he gives us an explanation in verse 12, and it's an interesting one. He makes this statement, "For whosoever hath, to him shall be given, and he shall have abundance. But whosoever hath not, from him shall be taken away even that which he hath." And that's why I say, the parables also become a test. How much faith do you have? Do you have enough interest to ask a simple question? What meaneth the parable? What's the meaning of that? Do you have enough interest? Jesus said those who are interested, those who have faith, those who have some degree of commitment will increase their faith, and they will increase their understanding, and they will come to know many more things. Yes?
Is there a possibility that the multitude could have been thinking of earthly things, like the sea, and Jesus was talking about the heavenly things?
Yeah. Some of them, and that's why I say the multitudes, many of them were there because they thought he might, he's been known to pass out free meals. He's had multitudes of people and just gives away a free meal. We may not have to cook tonight. Some of them were there just for those kind of things. Some people were there because some family member or someone they loved, or perhaps they themselves were suffering from some kind of ailment. They were plagued by something, and they were seeking deliverance. But that's not exactly the same kind of faith, is it, that a disciple would have? The disciple wants to understand. A disciple is a learner. And so we usually have the master and the disciple kind of relationship. And so, again, many times they call him master or teacher. What does this mean? The student wants to learn. The student wants to know. And so they have some desire. They have some faith. They have a desire here. And those who have some, again, more will be given. And Jesus promises that he can have abundance. But who doesn't have? If you don't have, even that which you have, or he has, will be taken away. And so he tells them this statement, and then says, "Therefore, or for that reason, speak out of them in parables." One of the things that Jesus teaches us in what we know as a Sermon on the Mount is about casting your pearls before swine. Sometimes people don't always have a good reason for the things that they're asking, the things that they're doing. And so even Jesus acknowledges the fact that you have to be a little bit careful in dealing with people, because just like the religious leaders, they sought to trick him up in his words and to use the things that he was teaching against them. So, fooled you. Somebody, what did that crazy man say today? And the little spies that was in the midst of that would come back to the ones who sent them and say, all he talked about was a man who was sowing wheat in his field. And they said, yeah, talk about something else than that. No, he spent, a big portion of time talking about a man who was sowing wheat in the field. And as we go down through here, he did this and that and the other and something about tares. And, he didn't really say anything that made any sense. So those who were there for the wrong reasons didn't get what they were looking for. But those who were interested enough could. And Jesus says, for that reason that I speak to them in parables, that seeing they may not see, and not perceive, and hearing they may hear and not understand. They could sit and listen to him talk all day long, and these parables and things that he was teaching there, they may have gleaned a little bit out of it or thought about some things, but they didn't get a whole lot. And so it seems strange to us that Jesus, who was trying to teach people about the kingdom, would speak to people saying, I speak this way so that seeing they don't see and hearing they don't understand. Well, that just doesn't seem to make any sense. I mean, that's just crazy. I mean, why do we spend so much time with all these people and you speak to them in parables? And Jesus says, that's what I do. And that's why I do it. And he goes on to explain, in the midst of this, as we look at this, because seeing they see not, and hearing they hear not, lest haply they should turn again, and it should be forgiven them. And unto them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah, where he saith, by hearing ye shall hear, and shall no wise understand, and seeing ye shall see, and shall no wise perceive. But again, that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Well, look at verse 15 here. For this people's heart is waxed gross, and their ears are dull of hearing, and their eyes have they closed, lest haply they should perceive with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and should turn again, and I should heal them. This is one of those, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? The statement that we have here, Jesus said in answering, why he does that. He says, I do it so seeing they don't see, and hearing they don't hear, and therefore they can't understand. And when we hear that, it just doesn't seem right. And there's a lot of questions about the parables and all that and why he did that. But then he turns around and says, this is what was described by Isaiah, even when he was not originally addressing this group of people when he wrote, but what he had to say is something that is applicable to these people today, because their heart is kind of waxed over. It's hardened. Their ears are dull of hearing. We have people today, they kind of get comfortable with things, and the Hebrew writer tells us we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things which we've heard, lest at any time we would let them slip. We have people in the church who, their level of faith, devotion, study is lacking. They really don't put much effort into preparing themselves for the worship, for the study, participation. They sit with their Bibles closed, and they sit there sometimes with their eyes closed. And Jesus says, this condition, there is a condition that we're dealing with. And these people have become so comfortable with just going through the motions that the things of God really do not affect them. And this is back to things that we've talked about before. Two people can come to service. One's heart, mind, soul is fully committed and devoted to learning and studying and gaining something. You know, when we sing, they sing. When we pray, they pray. When we study, their Bible's open. But there's a person sitting on the pew behind them that's going through the exact same thing, and by looking at them, we suppose that both of them are actively engaging in the worship and the things of God. But one of them, when they're singing, the words are ringing true in their heart. They are being taught and admonished, as the scriptures say. They let the song teach them, encourage them. They think about the words that they're saying. The other one, we sung that song so many times. I'm holding my songbook, but I am not even looking at what page. It could be on any page. It doesn't really matter. I'd sit there and I'd sing the song because we've sung this over and over and over and over again. That person's heart's waxed gross.
First Peter 15 says, be holy in all manner of conversation, everything you know.
Yeah. In all the things, in all of our actions, in all of our deeds. And so this is the parables. You know, two people come, one person leaves full. You know, if you're not hungry, you know, if you've ever been sick, you know, it really doesn't matter what people cook. You don't want any of it. Because if you're not hungry, it's hard to eat. You know, I mean, you might take a bite or two just to satisfy somebody, but you really don't want to eat. But if you're really hungry, you're a person that can be full. And that's the thing that Jesus talks about. Those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, they will be filled. But those that are like this, who are just going through the motions, and you have to remember, we have the Pharisees. You know, they were concerned about the outside of the cup and the pots and pans and all, but Jesus said inwardly there was all kinds of corruption, rot, disgusting things. And from the abundance of the heart, again, the mouth speaketh. And so it's not what goes in the mouth that defiles a man, but it's what comes out from within. And so Isaiah speaks to the Jewish people of that time who were going to be led away into captivity. And so it is a pre-existing condition. And it is a pre-existing condition that we bring upon ourselves. We either keep our relationship with the Lord fresh. You know, we have an active prayer life. We have an active study life. We're searching the scriptures. We're wanting to show ourselves approved unto God. We're not just going through motions. We want a relationship with God. And again, that our coming together is like a nice dinner. It's a nice supper. There's a lot of meat to digest and consider. And so this is where they're at. They're really not that interested, at least in the things that matter. You know, as far as getting a free meal, as far as getting Granny healed, as far as getting the demon cast out of my son, I'm all for that. You know, it's just not an issue because that's for me. What's in it for me? I once had a lady who, she would come to church on Sunday morning, and then Sunday night she'd sit on the glider on her front porch, and she wouldn't come to service. She'd sit there, watch people go in the building, watch them come out of the building. And, you talk to her, it's like, well, I just don't get anything out of it. Well, if you don't put nothing in, you don't get nothing out. It's like a bank account. If you don't put anything in it, they're going to let you take so much out, and then they'll be calling you. And so that's kind of what was going on with this generation then, and that's what's going on with this generation now. Again, we invite people to come to the services. We invite people to come to worship. We invite people to watch programs and all that, and this goes right past them because they don't have a heart for it. They don't have a stomach for it. Again, it's not something their eyes want to see, and it's not something their ears want to hear. And so just like the parable of the sower and the things that we see, it makes a big difference. So in 16 he says, "But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear." So you came and you asked. It's a great story, but I've got a funny feeling that there's more to it than just a guy putting wheat in a field. And so I'm asking, what is the meaning of this? And so they want to study. They want to know more. People read the Bible, and sometimes they get into something and they say, "Well, I just don't understand that," and they close their Bible and lay it off to the side because, that if the question was really, if it was true, they were looking for a reason to close the Bible and set it off to the side anyway. Other people will read something that they don't understand, and again, you can go to the computer and look stuff up. You can go to the concordance and look stuff up. You can go to commentaries and look things up. I want to know what that means. James says, "If any of us lack wisdom, we can ask God, who giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it'll be given to us." So if there's something that we need we don't have, God is willing to do that. And so Jesus said, "Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For verily I say unto you that many prophets and righteous men have declared or have desired to see the things which ye see, and saw them not, and hear the things which ye hear, and heard them not." There is a lot of people who've entered into eternity that would like to have the opportunity to sit with us tonight. They'd like the opportunity to hear. There are many of those who lived under the patriarchal period or lived under the period of the Jews. The dream of their life was beyond them, but how wonderful it would be if I could just have, a scroll. It didn't really matter which book, just if I could just have one. The possibility of the whole collection of what we know as the Old Testament for many that's just an absolute impossibility. That's just not going to happen. Because the cost of getting Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the Pentateuch could cost you a year's salary. Who's going to pay, at that time, who's going to give up a year's salary? After all, you have to pay the scribe that writes it. And so, to be able to slip a New Testament in your back pocket or your briefcase or to have one in your car, that was beyond the ability of most people to even comprehend. And then when it came time to deal with the kingdom of heaven and the church and all that, there have been many. There's been prophets. There have been great men. Abraham, desired to see the things of God fully revealed when all the nations of the earth would be blessed through his seed. He died in faith, but he didn't see those things. And so today we have all kinds of opportunity before us, and so many people ignore that. And so sadly, so many people, just like in Jesus' day, will literally miss the boat. Is there any questions or comments down through there? And he said unto them, Know ye not this parable? And how shall you know all the parables? If you don't understand this one, how are you going to understand all the others? And then in 18 he says, Hear. Let me explain it. Hear ye the parable of the sower. Now the parable is this: the seed is the word of God. The sower soweth the word, and these, or those, by the wayside. Where the word is sown are they that have heard, and when they have heard, then straightway cometh Satan, the devil, and taketh away the word from their heart. When he talks about those who were in the straight way, again, in the fields of wheat, rather than having 100 people trample through your field, they made a walkway, a path on the outside, the wayside, on the side of the field. There was a way around the field. That's why it's called wayside or straight way. And so people would walk on that and walk on that and walk on that, and they would pack it down till it was as hard as concrete. And so Jesus said that when you throw the seed on the concrete, just like the birds in the parable, it's not going to go in the ground. It's not going to take root. And besides that, it's right out there in the open, that packed down ground. The birds just love that. That's a free for all. I mean, that's all free for them as much as they can eat. And if you know birds, you'll know they will keep eating until they explode almost. So, the idea of this, of course, was that many people's hearts are so hardened that no matter what they hear from the scriptures, it falls like in the wayside, that hard ground. And the devil is really good at taking it away. He snatches it up just like the birds before it has a chance to get into the ground. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and understands it not, then cometh the evil one and snatcheth away that which hath been sown in his heart. This is he that was sown by the wayside. And so my encouragement, Jesus' encouragement, is that when we hear things we don't really have an understanding of, maybe we need to jot something down, spend a little bit more time looking at it, because it can get away from you. At least before COVID, we would have at least 4 lessons a week. But again, if you ask somebody 2 weeks later what we studied on Sunday morning, sadly, most of them wouldn't know. I don't really remember. I think we were somewhere in the book of Romans, but I'm really not sure. That's the way most people are. And, they're not interested enough to go back and look at it after the lesson, to study through it again, to think about it. That's what Jesus is saying here. The heart of people is at the very center of all of this. The heart is like the soul. And if it's too hard, it will just zip right past us and it will be gone. And so those in like manner are they that are sown upon the rocky places. So when they've heard the word, straightway receive it with joy. And these have no root in themselves, but endure for a while. Then when affliction or persecution arises because of the word, straightway they stumble, and in time of temptation fall away. There are some who hear the word and they delight in it. They do at least comprehend what it is. But again, the Word of God is again competing with a lot. And they've got a lot on their plate. And Jesus said that there comes a time, surely you're not one of them, are you? You're not turning into a Christian or something, are you? Yes.
To a certain extent, you're the sower.
Yeah.
You're the one that chose the word. We're the hearers.
Well, in this particular case, but in some cases, again, everybody's the sower when they're talking to somebody else about the Word of God. And so, there are people who, when their friends, again, say, does that mean you're not going to do this with us? And does that mean you're not going to do that with us? And for a while, they might actually resist it. No, I can't go out partying with you. I can't do this, can't do that. And, then for a period of time, they may be able to hold out, but by and by, just like that sown on the rocky places, in times of temptation, in times of trouble, affliction or persecution, somebody again hurts their feelings by saying something to them, and all of that. Their faith is still not deep enough and grounded enough, and so by and by they stumble, fall, they're offended. They, like those sown on the rock, go away. Others are they that sown among thorns. These are they that have heard the word, and as they go on their way, the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches and the lusts of other things enter in, choke the word, and it becomes unfruitful. They are choked with cares and riches and pleasures of this life and bring no fruit to perfection. And again, those who are sown among the thorns is he that heareth the word and the care of this world, the deceitfulness of riches. How many people have, again, it was always unique to me, people always blamed the church, they blamed the elders, they blamed the preacher because their children didn't turn out right, and they brought them on Sunday morning occasionally to Sunday school. Wednesday night, they had something going on at school, something else they were doing, and they weren't there. We never seen them. We know who they were. We had met them. But in reality, we never saw them. But we took the blame because, surely we should have saw to it that they got a better education than that. But again, if you don't come home for supper, you just, I can't help it that you are hungry. It's just the way it is. And so many people, and even adults, are filled with the cares. I want my children to have the better things. I want my children to experience things. And so they get them so twisted up in the things of the world, and people get twisted up in the things of the world, and over the years, you see, again, people, they schedule stuff on Wednesday. They go to a doctor appointment and they say, when you want to come back, I got an opening on this day or that day. I wonder how many people actually say, no, that's on a Wednesday. I've got church. I can't do that. Or how many say, yeah, I'll take that Wednesday. That way I don't have to go home. I don't have to go home and get ready for church. I've got an excuse. So the cares of the world, the troubles of the world, those kind of things. We got band practice, we got soccer practice, we've got this, we've got that. And there are some people in the church that are just so busy going from place to place to place. They don't have time to read the scriptures. They don't have time to study. They don't have time to talk to their children about the Lord. And these are the ones Jesus said that, again, they may have good intentions, and they might, if you ask them, do you believe in the church? Do you believe, in the gospel's message? You believe, oh, yes, we believe that. But the cares and the things of the world, jobs, again, people, I got to make a living, and so my boss says I have to work Sunday and Wednesday, so I I can only come on Sunday night if you have that. Again, if you take a job, knowing that you're not going to be able to come to church, you're letting the cares and things and riches choke things out. And so, it's easy for people to hear the story of the sower and just let it go in one ear and out the other and never catch the meaning. But when Jesus explains it, it takes on a much, much deeper concept. And like I said, to me, it's a parable of the soils because it's about the hearts of people. If they let the cares and riches and things of this world get the best of them, right there, Jesus explained why that is. They got themselves all tangled up in that. That's where they ended up, and so that's what's going to happen. Again, people start well, but they just fall off. And I have an explanation for that. People who we invite or hear the gospel's message and just let it go again. But Jesus says that falls on the good ground is that people have and receive with an honest and good heart. They hold fast. They accept those things. They understand and they put those things into action. And as such, they're able to bring forth fruit in their lives. They're able to be productive Christians. They're able to produce. Again, like James says, if you're going to show me your faith without works, I'll show you my faith by my works.
In closing this evening, we wish to thank you again for spending your time in study with us. We hope the lesson has been uplifting and motivational. We encourage you to return again for our next lesson. Until then, may we invite you to visit our website. You will find many study opportunities. Our resource page has links to the Gospel Broadcasting Network, a 24/7 station with many great Christian programs and speakers. In Search of the Lord's Way, with Brother Phil Sanders. We have 2 links for Bibles and downloadable software. If you are looking to really expand your knowledge, perhaps you might like to try World Video Bible School, a college-level learning site free of charge. So, until next time, may God bless and keep you in His care as we walk together in His truth. And remember, as always, the churches of Christ salute you.